In this video, we're going to talk about 3 guidelines to follow between training programs. Essentially, what to do after a double kettlebell program. What's up, man? It's Hector, the Kettlebell Coach. If you're new to the channel, welcome. My name's Hector Gutierrez Jr., where for over 12 and a half years, I ran one of only 2 kettlebell training only facilities here in Texas, where we helped men and women 40 plus build stronger, leaner, and more capable bodies so you can do more of what you enjoy, and how to get all that done in less time. So if that sounds like a result that you'd like to attain for your life, you're in the right spot. So welcome to the channel. Okay. So 3 guidelines to follow between training programs. This is a question that I've received multiple times, and this is also a question we get from some of our students when transitioning from one program to the next. You know, I've answered questions on the channel around, you know, I've now completed this program. What's the next thing that I should do? Or I've attained this goal, and now I want to start working towards this. Like, what are some of those next steps? So what I want to give to you and what I want to share with you today are 3 guidelines to follow when you're bridging 2 programs together, because that's exactly where I'm at in this journey. So if you are just chiming in, my own personal training I closed out 15 months, kind of like an experiment, if you will, but a kettlebell journey, if you will, on the kettlebell jerk, with the ultimate goal of a double 48 kilogram jerk session. My goal is sets of 3 with a pair of 48s for 44 minutes. And my deadline to attain that is my 48th birthday. And so now that I've completed 15 months of practice and training, I'm going to be transitioning to my first planned training protocol. So really quick, before I dive into the 3 guidelines, I want to set some context of why I'm going to a planned training protocol, and I want to call out something that I tend to stand against, and it's this whole concept, this whole idea of auto-regulated training. And I think there's a lot of value in auto-regulation because, I myself have used it, and I think it's a great tool if you just want to work out, if you want to practice, if you're a beginner. I think taking an auto-regulated approach to your training is a very smart initial tactic. What is auto-regulated training? It's essentially allowing your body to make its own adjustments. It's listening to your body, if you will. So example would be, set a timer for 20 minutes and perform sets of 3 clean and presses, and just go when you're ready, essentially, right? So let's say on day 1, you set a timer for 20 minutes and you do 10 sets of 3. Well, on the next week, you would set a timer for 20 minutes and you might do more volume or you might do less volume. Just kind of allow your body to dictate your readiness, essentially. Like, that's a simplified explanation of what auto-regulation is. And I think that's a great approach for beginners. If you're a beginner and if you're in a time constraint, also, okay, I'm going to do this for 20 minutes, and when the timer expires, the timer expires. I think that's a great approach. Where I think that can fall off, and again, there's pros and cons to both. And I did a full episode on this. It's called auto-regulation versus PTP, which is planned training protocols. I did a full comparison between the 2. And so I won't go into too much detail here because you can check out that video. But essentially, I think where auto-regulation can fall off, where the holes are there, is you rely on your feelings. You rely on how you feel, and sometimes we can have disordered attachments to how we feel. And therefore, we'll either, 1, push ourselves too hard, or we won't push ourselves hard enough. And to me, that's where planned training protocols comes in, is a planned training protocol protects you from yourself. Here are the prescribed reps, sets, etc. Do these, and then you're done. Now, the holes in that is it can be difficult to adhere to if your life is just crazy busy. Maybe you travel a lot. Well, you might not be able to stick to a planned training protocol. So there's pros and cons to both of these approaches, and I cover that in detail in my auto-regulated versus planned training protocol video. So you can check that out when you get a chance. But the reason why I set that context is, for 15 months, for about a good 6 months of that, I followed an auto-regulated approach where I would set a timer for 30 minutes and I would do sets of 3 on the minute. Then I got to a point to where I would incorporate a training variable, right? Intensity in the middle of the week. And then I did that for a good 6 months. And then after that, I started kind of creating a hybrid model where I would do auto-regulated, but then I was following training by the numbers. So I would say, okay, I'm going to do 30 minutes, and I'm going to do singles for the first week. Week 2, I need to shoot for a 20% increase. And here's now my target. And then my goal would be to hit that target. So I'm getting some density training in, I'm getting some auto-regulation from the previous week, but now I'm combining that with plan training. Okay, in plan training, you need a plan training protocol if you have a particular goal. And that's why I'm moving now towards plan training protocol, because before I was just gathering data, I was just practicing. Now I've got a very specific goal that I want to attain. So if you have a very specific goal that you're trying to attain, you need a plan training approach. You need a plan training approach with your nutrition, and you need a plan training approach with your training. You can't, if you have a very specific like fat loss goal, like I want to get to X% body fat, I want to lose X amount of pounds, following an intuitive eating approach is not going to get you there, because we are in the position that we're in because we followed an intuitive eating approach, right? We ate based on how we felt. And so that's why, there's just a fine line. You got to know how to... what does Jocko say? There's a dichotomy, right? There's a dichotomy to both of those. So you just have to be careful with that. But I give that context because now that I have a very particular goal, now I'm heading into plan training protocol. And so these are 3 guidelines that we provide for our clients in the academy. These are 3 guidelines that I follow myself. Like like any good chef, I eat my own cooking. And so what you see me doing here is I'm going through something that I call a kettlebell medley. Okay, so here are the 3 guidelines to follow between training programs. So if you just finished doing a double kettlebell program, step number 1 or guideline number 1 is you need a transition/synergistic phase of training. So what that does is after a double kettlebell training program or any bilateral training program, like if you're doing a deadlift program, if you're doing a double clean and press program, like you name it, you need some, and you're transitioning from one phase to the next, you need some kind of synergistic phase of training. And what that looks like is a combination of different exercises. Okay, so you're something that's going to allow you to transition from one program to the next. And what I'm doing here is I'm using, so there's 7 steps. I'm going to be putting together another future video for you on the 7-step roadmap to a high-performance body. And so I'll break all those 7 steps down in that video. But what I'm doing here, one of the steps is a transition/synergistic phase of training. And ultimately what it does is it preps you for the next training cycle. So you can't keep pushing the pedal to the metal in your training. You can't go from heavy double kettlebell program, heavy deadlift program, and just jump right to the next training cycle. You've got to step off the cliff a little bit. And I had my own peak where I completed a full 6-week program of training only with the 36s. Well, what can happen in a double kettlebell program is you can develop some asymmetries, right? Because you are symmetrically loaded, and it's possible to develop bad habits. But you won't know what those bad habits are when you're loaded symmetrically. We call these, in one of our programs, it's called the Strongest Tech Foundations. In that program, we help you identify any what we call movement viruses. So a movement virus is compensations. So the way that we move each day, sitting, doing the same bilateral movements over and over, it's possible to create bad habits and movement viruses. So we want to transition from training, like we've got to step off the peak a little bit, and we've got to make some adjustments to the training and incorporate some other skills so that we can identify any potential asymmetries that may have popped up, so we can identify those and essentially prep us for the next training cycle. So that's guideline number 1, is you want to have some kind of transition program, some kind of synergistic phase that incorporates it's almost like a debrief. Like, okay, these are the skills that I trained for the last, X period of time. Well, let me break down some of those pieces. Let me work. If I worked on the clean and the press, maybe I work on, the clean by itself. Maybe I work on the press by itself. Maybe, and it's within the context of this program that I just finished, jerk. I'm doing the jerk. Well, maybe I want to work on my press. Maybe I want to back up a little bit and synergize a few different skills. And that's guideline number 2. Once you identify what some of these skills are that you're going to practice them for 2 weeks. So practice the skills that you plan on training for at least 2 weeks. Why 2 weeks? Well, you might even do 4 weeks, but I think 2 weeks is a good number. It takes about 2 weeks for your body to make an adaptation to anything, right? After about 2 weeks, your body starts making an adaptation. This goes for your strength training, and this also goes for like your nutrition as well. So example, just from the nutrition perspective, like if you're on point with your diet and you're killing it, and you've been doing that for 4, 6, 8 weeks, if you have a cheat meal, quote unquote cheat meal, it's not going to ruin your progress. Not in that one day. Because what we do today in our training and our nutrition, we don't start to see the fruits of those efforts for about 2 weeks. This is why people that start programs and they don't see immediate results quit programs, because they're expecting, like, your body's on a 2-week delay, essentially. It's on a 2-week delay. And so if you can just wait those 2 weeks, if you can stay consistent to the thing for 2 weeks, you'll start to see some of those results start to pop up, but it takes 2 weeks. Now, getting that flywheel moving, if you cheat, if you will, in the beginning, you're just not going to see the results that you want. So you've got to do things consistently for 2 weeks to start to reap some of those benefits. Now, once you're seeing the benefits, if you have, like, let's say you have a cheat meal, right? Family comes into town and you just, you indulge a little bit on one day or one meal, you're not going to completely destroy your efforts, because if you get back on track, you won't see the fruits, like, from a negative point, you won't see those fruits for at least 2 weeks. But if you clean the diet back up and you get back on track, it's not going to affect you. It's when you compound those and you cheat, 3, 4, 5 days in a row, and about 2 weeks after that, you'll start to see that weight creep on or your pants get tighter. Like, have you ever noticed that if you're not on point with your nutrition, if you're not on point with your training, let's just say from the nutrition standpoint, if you're not on point there, it seems almost as if you wake up one day and just like your pants don't fit. It's once you reach that 2 week threshold, at least this is what we've noticed with our students and even with myself, is it's right about that 2 week. The consistent effort for about 2 weeks start to reveal themselves. So that's a long drawn out reason for why practice your skills for about 2 weeks. Whatever training plan that you're going to do, practice those skills for 2 weeks. And that's what I'm doing here in this video. This is something I call a kettlebell medley, which is a combination. It's a synergy of 3 different exercises that I plan on training. So what I'm doing here is I'm doing a single kettlebell jerk. I'm doing a double kettlebell jerk. And then I'm doing the long cycle clean and jerk. And the reason for that is because these are going to be the 3 skills that I plan on training in my planned training protocol. So they honor guideline number 1. It's a transition. It's a step down. So I'm not doing doubles every day. So that single kettlebell, the reason for that single kettlebell is now I'm asymmetrically loaded. So if I've developed any bad habits, they will reveal themselves in that single kettlebell jerk. Am I shifting too much to one side? And I've found asymmetries even doing this. And one of the things that I've discovered is, and one of the things I don't like that I'm finding about this training session here, is my kettlebell clean is off. If you pay attention to the double kettlebell clean, and I think it's just by virtue of the bells being a lot lighter, coming off of a pair of 36s, dropping all the way down to 32s, all the way down to 24s. When I clean both bells up, the bells are driving up to my chest. The goal when you do the clean is to clean the bells to your waistline, not cleaning them to the rack, to the chest position. If you clean them to your waistline, they will finish in the rack position. And I noticed that when I do the single kettlebell clean, I'm able to control that transition from the bell to overhead. So the whole point here is I'm learning things. I'm discovering things by breaking it down by single kettlebell. So that's why you need some kind of transition, some kind of synergistic phase, okay, to help you prep for the next cycle. And it's kind of like stepping down, kind of like a deload, if you will. And then guideline number 2 is practice the skills that you plan on training in the upcoming cycle. Practice those for 2 weeks. Get acclimated with some of those skills, and that's what I'm doing here. So single kettlebell work helps me identify any asymmetries that I may have developed along the way. Practicing your skills for 2 weeks is also a means of recovery. So not only when we practice our skills, not only does it allow us to strengthen our default settings, right? Because that's what our skills ultimately are. Not only does it allow us to practice our skills, which are our default settings, it's also a means of recovery. And if you want to be able to train hard for the next training cycle, you have to implement means of recovery into your training. The third thing that this does, and the third reason why I'm following this kettlebell medley and practicing the skill set, is it's a means to vary the intensity. I'm only training with one size kettlebell. So here I'm using a pair of 24s. So I'm not using multiple kettlebells. So by virtue of me going from single kettlebell to double kettlebell jerk from set 1 to set 2, that's a 100% increase in load. So my first single clean and jerk is like a prep for the set to come. And so then the double jerk, that's a 100% increase in load. And then when I go from just double kettlebell jerk on set 2, and then I move to long cycle clean and jerk, that's another vary in intensity, because now I'm getting in some conditioning. I like the clean because the clean, I can now practice one clean in between each press, so there's more skill development there. I'm getting in some conditioning, and I like the clean and the jerk because it allows me to reset my body. It allows me to reset my muscles. When you just do jerks over and over, or even just presses over and over, you start to create fatigue locally within the muscle. Well, I want to manage that fatigue. I want to manage that load. So by re-cleaning, it's almost like a slight reset. So it's going to tax you more global. You'll experience more global fatigue with the clean and jerk versus just localized fatigue by the jerk only. So those are a couple of differences between the jerk and the long cycle clean and jerk, which I'll also be doing a video. I had a question come through about why am I only doing the jerk on my last cycle and not long cycle clean and jerk. I'm going to break down some of those differences, but one of them is managing the load. Okay, varying the intensity. And that brings me to guideline number 3. Guideline number 3 is honor the 3 principles of program design. And principle number 1 of designing a program, or bridging the gaps between any program, is continuity of the training process. Essentially, consistency. So the reason why I'm practicing single kettlebell, double kettlebell jerk, long cycle clean and jerk, I'm still training the jerk, but they're essentially, in a sense, 3 different exercises, even though they're still the jerk. So I'm still training the jerk, but now I've stepped down and I'm managing the load better. So when I go from single kettlebell jerk to double kettlebell jerk, that's a 100% increase in load, as I mentioned. And then when I go from double jerk to long cycle clean and jerk, I'm going from managing localized fatigue to now I'm going to be stressing my body globally. But then when I come back to single kettlebell jerk is also like a recovery set after an intense long cycle clean and jerk. But at the end of the day, I'm still, at the end of this set, at the end of the session, I'm still maintaining I'm still keeping training continuous, and I'm still training the jerk as a whole. So you want to maintain the continuity of the training process. And I've already mentioned the second principle of program design, I've mentioned this a couple times, is load management. You need to manage the load. Meaning you can't go, especially if you're going to be following a planned training protocol, you can't just plan all, you can, but it's very fatiguing. You need to be able to recover. So you can't just plan all volume with a pair of 36 kilos. Like, you need to incorporate some light weights, you need to incorporate some medium weights, and then you need to incorporate some heavy weights. This is another one of the steps of the 7 steps of a high performance body, right? When it comes to developing a full system, one of the steps is volume distribution. And so that volume distribution allows you to manage the load. And then the third principle of program design is specialized variety. Doing the same thing, just slightly different. And so obviously there's a lot of overlap between these 3 principles, but that's what I'm doing here in today's Kettlebell Medley is specialized variety. So simply by going from single jerk to double jerk to long cycle clean and jerk, I'm getting some specialized variety there. Here's something else I'm doing for specialized variety. You see that I'm training with competition-sized kettlebells. That tiny little nuance of going from the classic size kettlebells, like the cast iron bells, to competition bells, that slight variation there requires an adaptation, right? The grip is a little bit different. The way they rest in the rack position is a little bit different, okay? So those are the 3 guidelines to follow when moving from one program to the next. What to do after doing a double kettlebell program. So number 1, just going to recap. Number 1, you need some kind of transition / synergistic phase of training to prep you for the next training cycle. You can't keep pushing pedal to the metal. You got to back off, right? You got to step off the peak. So you need something that's going to prep you for the next training cycle. Number 2, you need to practice the skills that you plan on training for at least 2 weeks to adapt to those skill sets. So in the context of this video, I'm running a kettlebell medley. I'm incorporating single kettlebell work, double kettlebell work, single jerk, double jerk, long cycle, clean and jerk. Those are a means of recovery. Those are a means of varying the intensity. And then number 3 is honor the 3 principles of program design. So if you're going to move from one program to the next, when you practice the skills, make sure they're continuous with your current training, your current goal. So it would make no sense if my particular goal is to train with a pair of 48 kilo double jerk bells, it would make no sense for me to switch to a bench press program, a kettlebell snatch program, kettlebell swing and get. It wouldn't make sense for me to move that, because I'm no longer continuous with what I'm trying to accomplish. Second part is load management. You need light weights, medium weights, and heavy weights included into the program, and knowing how to distribute your volume across those intensity zones. And the number 3 is specialized variety, which we're doing with the Kettlebell Medley. I'm incorporating different variations of the jerk. Another example of different variation of the jerk, which I didn't do here, could be I could practice a split jerk, but I'm still doing the jerk nonetheless, right? But single kettlebell jerk, double kettlebell jerk, long cycle clean and jerk is specialized variety. And I'm going to be doing this for probably this next week. So this whole entire week, I'm going to practice this, and I'm going to probably do it for another week. So 2 weeks, right? So do that for 2 straight weeks. And after 2 straight weeks, I'll be moving into my planned training protocol. So that's all I got for you today, man. If you got questions, you got thoughts around this, drop them in the comments below. If you're liking the video, if this helped you out, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Click the like button, turn on notifications for more kettlebell content. And I'll see you on the next one, man. Peace.